Hi everyone, we're the NASA Capstone team. To introduce ourselves, I'm Isabella Girardi.
I'm Abby Rigatti.
I'm Sarah Loveno.
I'm Jake Carey.
I'm Kieran Higgins.
And we'd also like to give a special thanks to our faculty advisor, Dr. Carlson, as well as our sponsors, Ed McLarney and Christina Hames, for their help throughout this project. Today, we will be going over the 2 transformation use cases that we've worked on this year, along with our work with their enterprise-wide adoption efforts. Now I'm going to pass it off to Abby to go over our problem statement.
Thanks, Izzy. So as Izzy touched on, NASA is looking for a way to measure their digital transformation progress moving into the future in order to help them increase efficiency and meet mission demands. In order to do this, we looked at 2 specific digital transformation projects that are currently in progress, the Mike's project and the Cynical project, as Izzy mentioned. After looking at these 2 projects, we developed both project-specific and enterprise-wide recommendations to help them increase their measurement in the digital transformation progress. We believe with increased measurement, we will be able to help them better gauge where they are in their transformation journey and maximize their impact. I'm now going to hand it over to Jake to talk about EDP Cynical.
Thanks, Abby. So EDP Cynical is essentially just an intelligent search engine. We wanted to track the solution in 3 different ways by measuring adoption. First, we have rollout preparedness, which will track through the functionality of the platform and also measuring employee buy-in. Next, we have quantitative metrics, which are some are planned and then some we plan to track once the visualizations are implemented. And then last, we have qualitative metrics, which are mainly tracked through employee sentiment. And now I'll pass it off to Kieran to start off the analysis and recommendations.
Thanks, Jake. So getting into rollout preparedness, talking about the functionality of the capability, we believe that it should be fully functional or as close to possible as fully functional at rollout. This is just to deter unsuccessful trials early on when you're using it. If a user goes on there and it's like half functional and they don't really understand how to use the capability, they'll be less likely to repeat and use it later on down the road and possibly go back to old tactics of finding the information they need to find. And also, the Cynical contract is a flat rate. So the more users that come back and increase usage in users will give you a better return on your investment as a whole. And I'm going to pass it over to Jake for internal marketing.
Thanks, Kieran. So to internally market the platform, we think that there should be a demonstration video shown to all employees within NASA. Within this video, we think success stories of some users who have already used the platform should be shared, along with some of the just more general benefits of the platform. And last, we expect it to be nearly free, just an investment of employee time. And now I'll pass it off to Izzy to cover the quantitative metrics.
Thanks, Jake. In addition to the metrics planned by the Cynical team, we also recommended tracking user information per search metrics and new versus returning users to better see how well this capability is being adopted across NASA. Since we didn't have access to user search data at the time, we created our own simulated data to create this dashboard that can ultimately be used to visually track adoption progress in real time once that data has been provided. Now I'm going to pass it off to Abby to go over our qualitative metrics.
Thanks, Izzy. So as Jake mentioned, when looking at qualitative metrics in terms of the EDP Cynical project, we really focused on employee sentiment and how the specific tool is meeting the needs of the employees. So one way of measuring this is an end of search survey that will display 3 to 5 questions about the success of that specific search, and then would be measured with the 5-point Likert scale of how much the employee either agreed or disagreed with that specific statement. A more in-depth way to track this would be using AI facial recognition while an employee is using the tool, and it would measure their emotional responses. Some other considerations as far as qualitative metrics would be the implementation of focus groups with multiple employees to share tips and tricks as to how they use that tool. And then also an added benefit could be employee contentment and the overall improvement of an employee's day-to-day activities. So that concludes our discussion on EDP Cynical, and we're now going to be moving into Mike's. So modern and inclusive collaboration spaces are meant to bridge the gap between at-home workers and in-person workers and encourage teamwork. So for our research plan for Mike's, we had a heavier focus on training because NASA has a heavier focus on teaching employees what this tool can do. So for training, we focused on how they were implementing the training and then surveying directly about the training. For the spaces themselves, we delved into software considerations they should have inside the room and then hardware that could enhance the experience for employees. Lastly, we want to maximize adoption. So we measured usage and then also how the adoption is related back to training. I'm now going to hand it over to Sarah to talk about our analysis and recommendations.
Thanks, Abby. So as Abby just mentioned, we focused our recommendations for this implementation on the training. We recommended that NASA did just-in-time training. That way the information was fresh in their mind upon usage of the spaces so that their process of getting the space set up was as seamless as possible. We also suggested FAQ-style modules, or questions that we figured would come up in the time that maybe they would just be starting to use the space or right before they use the space, that we could just quickly give them a short video that would get them rolling. And then we also, for the training, advise a survey at the end of the training modules. We would also use the same 5-point Likert scale. Some questions we thought we could ask would be, if the training improved the outlook on the spaces, how likely you are to suggest using these spaces after completing the training, if you felt like it was a good use of your time to complete the training, and how successful you feel to complete a meeting in these spaces. Then using these surveys, we figured we could implement some A/B testing by just changing a certain variable. One of the main ones we looked at was changing the length of the video clip, so whether it's the bulk training or the shorter modules, and just using those same surveys, comparing sentiment results, and seeing which training method was most effective for these employees. And now I will pass it off to Jake to get into physical implementation.
Thanks, Sarah. So we split the physical implementation into 2 sections, software and hardware. As for software, NASA's already a predominantly Microsoft 365 organization, but we did want to just check some of the other platforms and see what they had to offer. Although they had some benefits over Microsoft 365, we recommend maintaining the use of 365 because it has the lowest cost and also the highest familiarity across NASA. And now I'll pass it on to Kieran to cover the hardware.
For the hardware section in the mic spaces, we believe that an OWL Pro will be very beneficial. This is basically about the height of this microphone here, and about the width of just like a portable Bluetooth speaker. It resembles an owl, and it also is a 360-degree camera view of the entire room. You place it in the middle of a table, and if someone is speaking, the camera will pan over to them, and when someone else speaks, it pans over to them, so it's as if you're moving your head back and forth within the space. And if multiple people are speaking at once, it'll give you a split screen view, and then you can speak as well just right from it, and people will hear you in the middle of the table. This is just because in the hybrid environment, it's very hard for remote users to feel included, and it promotes collaboration within the remote user and makes them feel as in the space as they possibly can. I'm going to pass it to Izzy for measuring space usage.
Thanks, Kieran. We recommended that they have a set implementation plan for measuring space usage prior to the rollout of these spaces. This includes tracking overall adoption progress, then diving deeper into measuring the usage and sentiment of the specific spaces, and having a plan for tracking this information at each specific NASA location, whether that be through key swipe entry, sign-in screens inside the space, or tracking software logins. We created simulated data and a dashboard again for this project, so they will be able to track adoption progress visually as soon as these spaces have been rolled out. To go into our work with enterprise-wide adoption, we first created a digital transformation model that acts as a roadmap for tracking adoption and transformation NASA-wide, then analyzed the 2 use cases that we've talked about today, and finally proposed mission-consistent metrics based on those use cases, which Kieran will talk more about now.
Thanks, Izzy. So for the mission-consistent metrics and the enterprise-wide standpoint, we really wanted to make sure that if there's a new digital transformation effort being implemented, you want to have some sort of foundation that you can use across all the different efforts to track. So we have adoption, employee sentiment, as well as return on investment. Adoption is just tracking user statistics, such as what type of user is using the capability currently, if there's repeat users, the job title of users, maybe the user, what center they're at. Employee sentiment is focusing on the surveys and the focus groups that could potentially be handled, and they would be just getting employee feedback, seeing what works, what doesn't, what they think can improve it. And then return on investment is just taking these metrics all together and seeing what the best return on the investment overall would be and how to incorporate that to make it even better down the road. I'm going to pass it on to Jake for an economic analysis.
Thanks, Kieran. So for economic analysis, we wanted to focus on monetary savings, time savings, and increased efficiency. When considering the EDP Cinequa platform, if by consolidating use to one platform, NASA would save costs on other platform subscriptions. As far as the Mike's benefits, we don't see direct benefits as a lot of it requires training, but we predict that the cost will pay off in the end. Next, by implementing automation, it will reduce the non-value adding activities that employees have to do and allow them to focus on some more mission specific goals. And then lastly, the CBA and NASA relationship over the years, we think that we've developed a strong connection, and that it would take more time and money to develop the trust and get those materials together that have been required throughout this project if they were to choose someone else. And now I'll pass it back to Kieran to wrap us up with the conclusions.
Thanks, Jake. So for the conclusion, we just think that NASA has a great foundation for the future moving forward within these two projects, as well as digital transformation down the road. Just an enterprise-wide standpoint and taking the broad perspective, it really just looks like very good for them moving forward. Trying to move into the new space with the hybrid workspace as well, from what COVID presented with everyone that works in the forces. And so then for the final MSBA impact, we just want to thank everybody here. This has been an awesome experience. We learned so much, especially having to think critically with squishy problems rather than having a direct blueprint on what actually has to be done. Working together collaboratively and just making the relationships with everybody here. It's been a fantastic time. Now we're going to open it up for questions.
I have a very in the weeds question, so whether or not you remember this, I don't know. When you were talking about A/B testing, you specifically said something about video. I'm just curious, did you find a sweet spot on the length of time for videos that were best?
I would say no, as we didn't actually conduct the A/B testing. This is more recommendations for NASA to conduct the testing. So no, I don't have an answer to that question. Thank you.